Welcome to PodForge, a deep dive into deep dive. Alright, so today we're diving into some fascinating stuff from the world of psychology and economics. You know, like how relationships can be viewed through the lens of economic theories, gender differences in how people handle emotions in relationships, and the role of socioeconomic status in creating imbalances in power. We'll break it down step by step, starting with social exchange theory, then moving into those gender differences in emotional outcomes, and finally touching on how money and status affect relationship dynamics. Let me think. It's all based on solid sources like that article from Simply Psychology and some studies on NCBI. So we're keeping it real and evidence-based here.
Wow, that sounds super intriguing, Anna. I mean, applying economics to love? That's wild. And it makes me wonder how everyday relationships play into this. So, from what I've read in that Simply Psychology piece, social exchange theory basically looks at relationships as a give and take, right? Like, people weigh the costs and benefits, deciding if the rewards are worth it. Which I guess explains why some folks stick around or bail. Wait, hold on. Can you explain how this theory actually works in real romantic scenarios? Because I feel like that could help listeners see the practical side.
Exactly, Vivian. And it's not as cold as it sounds. According to the social exchange theory from that Simply Psychology article, relationships are like ongoing transactions where folks exchange resources, whether that's emotional support, time, or even material things, and they keep score to see if it's balanced. For instance, if one person is putting in a lot more effort without getting much back, they might decide to end things, which is pretty common in modern dating. Oh, and that's fascinating because it ties into how people evaluate their partnerships over time, like assessing if the rewards outweigh the costs. Let me think. A good analogy is like a business deal. You wouldn't keep investing in a failing company, right?
Okay, that's really interesting. And it helps me understand why some relationships fizzle out. Wait, so if we're talking about real examples, does this theory suggest that people might stay in uneven relationships if the benefits are still high? I was gonna say, from what I recall in that Keith E. Rice blog you mentioned, it covers how external factors, like societal norms, can influence these exchanges, making it even more complex. That's wild, because in today's world, with people juggling jobs and social pressures, it could explain a lot about why couples argue over things like household chores or financial contributions.
Absolutely, Vivian. And building on that, the Keith E. Rice blog from Integrated Sociopsychology talks about how these economic theories integrate with behavioral sciences, meaning that cultural and psychological factors can tip the scales in relationships. For example, if someone feels they're not getting enough emotional rewards, they might seek alternatives, which aligns with the idea of maximizing personal gains. That's actually a key point from the sources. It's not just about money, it's about intangible things like affection and validation too. I never thought of it that way until I dug into this, but it really shows how relationships aren't always equal, and that can lead to some real tensions over time.
Wait, hold on. That's making me think about how this plays into gender differences. I've seen studies suggesting men and women might approach these exchanges differently, like in emotional outcomes from casual relationships. From that PMC article on gender differences in motives for casual sex, it says women often have more negative emotional results compared to men, which could tie back to social exchange if women are weighing emotional costs more heavily. So is that what you're getting at? It's concerning. because it implies there might be built-in inequalities based on gender roles, and I want to explore how that fits with the overall theory.
You're spot on there, Vivian, and let's dive deeper into that. According to the research from PMC articles like the one on gender differences in emotion regulation, women tend to show different patterns in how they process and respond to emotional stimuli in relationships, often experiencing more intense negative outcomes from casual encounters. For instance, that study from 2022 highlights how women might prioritize emotional connections, leading to greater distress if those aren't met, whereas men might focus more on physical aspects. That's really backed by fMRI studies showing distinct brain responses. As, in the article on sex differences in emotion regulation, where women exhibit stronger reactions in areas linked to emotional processing. I mean, it's not about stereotypes. It's data-driven, and it raises questions about how these differences could make exchanges in relationships feel asymmetrical.
Oh, that's actually fascinating. And it connects back to what we were saying earlier. Wait, so if women are more likely to have negative emotional outcomes, does that mean they're getting the short end in these social exchanges? From the overview in Science Direct on economic psychology, it seems like individual behaviors are influenced by broader economic conditions, which could exacerbate these gender gaps. That's wild. Because in a relationship context, it might mean women are investing more emotionally without equivalent returns. And I think that's something listeners can relate to in their own lives.
Right. And to build on that, these gender differences aren't just anecdotal. Multiple studies, like the one on emotional responses from NCBI, show consistent patterns where women report higher levels of emotional investment and subsequent vulnerability. For example, in casual sex scenarios, the research indicates women often face more regret or anxiety, which could be seen as a higher cost in the exchange theory framework. Let me think. It's like they're putting more on the line emotionally, and that might not always balance out with what they receive. Oh, and that's where things get complicated, because while the sources don't specify exact behaviors, they do point to these patterns influencing relationship dynamics overall.
Wait, really? That's eye-opening. And it makes me skeptical about how fair these exchanges can be in practice. Sort of like if socioeconomic factors are thrown into the mix. Does that make it even worse? From that PMC article on socioeconomic status and intimate relationships, it discusses how financial pressures can strain couples, potentially amplifying these gender differences. So basically, if one partner has more resources, they might hold more power, leading to asymmetrical dynamics that affect emotional exchanges. I was going to say, that's probably why some relationships struggle under economic stress, and it's a natural extension of what we've been talking about.
Exactly, Vivian, and that's a great point to transition to our third topic. Socioeconomic status really plays a big role, as outlined in that NCBI article on how economic pressure impacts couple resilience. It shows that when financial strain hits, relationships can become imbalanced, with one partner possibly dominating decisions or resources, which ties into power dynamics we see in economic theories. For instance, the study highlights how lower socioeconomic status correlates with higher conflict, and that could mean the partner with less economic power ends up in a weaker position in exchanges. That's genuinely concerning, because it suggests that external factors like income inequality can distort what should be mutual give and take in relationships.
Yeah, that's absolutely wild. And it makes me think about how this could play out in everyday life. Like, if one person is the breadwinner, do they get more say in emotional matters too? The article on financial management and relationship quality from PMC points out that poor money handling can lead to dissatisfaction, which might reinforce those asymmetrical powers. Wait, hold on. Can we tie this back to gender? Because if women are already more emotionally invested, and they're often in lower earning roles statistically, that could compound the issues we've discussed. Okay, that's really making me reflect on my own experiences and how economics shapes love.
You're right to bring that up, and it's all interconnected. From the sources, we see that socioeconomic disparities can exacerbate gender-based differences, creating a cycle where power imbalances affect emotional exchanges. For example, in relationships under economic pressure, the partner with more resources might control more aspects, leading to feelings of inequality that mirror what we've learned about social exchange. Let me think. It's like a marketplace where not everyone has equal bargaining power, and that can lead to long-term dissatisfaction. Overall, this stuff from the research really underscores the need for awareness in how we navigate relationships.
That's a solid wrap-up, Anna. Looking back, we've covered how social exchange theory frames relationships as cost-benefit analyses, the gender differences and emotional outcomes that add layers of complexity, and how socioeconomic factors can tip the scales toward inequality. It's eye-opening stuff, and I think listeners will walk away with a better understanding of the hidden economics in their own lives. Thanks for guiding us through this. Let's do another deep dive soon. Yeah?
Absolutely, Vivian! And to sum it up, these insights from the sources remind us that relationships aren't just about feelings. They're influenced by economic principles, gender dynamics, and societal pressures, all of which we should be mindful of for healthier connections. Thanks for joining us today, and remember to check out the articles we referenced if you want to dive deeper. Until next time, stay curious.